So friends, did you ever encounter a circumstance where somebody was told to do something, maybe even ordered to do something by a judge or a court, and that person said, well, I'm going to do it not because I was told or ordered to do it. I'm going to do it because I want to do it. Well, that brings us to Attorney General Pam Bondi and Abrego Garcia. Attorney General Bondi, the Department of Justice, the Trump administration, were ordered by courts, trial court judge, appeals court judges, and the United States Supreme Court to return Abrego Garcia to the United States. And what did Pam Bondi say? No, can't be done. Impossible. He's in a whole nother country, a sovereign nation. We don't have the authority or ability to bring him back. Well, now, Pam Bondi just brought Abrego Garcia back. But the message she sent is, well, I'm not bringing him back because I was ordered by courts to bring him back. No, I'm bringing him back because I want to bring him back, because I want to prosecute him. Okay, Pam. Friends, can I invite you to maybe sit back, get comfortable, because we are going to take apart the Abrego Garcia indictment. Because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, in my 30 years as a federal prosecutor, I drafted and presented to grand juries more indictments than I could ever count. So when I look at this 2-count, 10-page indictment that a federal grand jury in Tennessee returned against Abrego Garcia, I am concerned, I am skeptical, and together today, I want to take you through that indictment and highlight why there is a strong argument that this is some trumped up bullshit. But as always, bullshit is a legal term. But as always, let's start with the new reporting. This from ABC News. Headline, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, newly returned to the U.S., appears in court on charges of trafficking migrants. And that article begins, mistakenly deported Salvadoran native Kilmar Abrego Garcia appeared in a Tennessee courtroom Friday, hours after he was brought back to the United States to face criminal charges for allegedly transporting undocumented migrants within the U.S. More than 2 months after the Trump administration admitted it mistakenly deported Abrego Garcia from Maryland to his native El Salvador, a 2-count indictment unsealed Friday alleges that he participated in a years-long conspiracy to haul undocumented migrants from Texas to the interior of the country. The return of Abrego Garcia from his native El Salvador follows a series of court battles in which the Trump administration repeatedly said it was unable to bring him back, drawing the country toward the brink of a constitutional crisis when the Trump administration failed to heed the Supreme Court's order to facilitate his return. He, Abrego Garcia, made his initial court appearance Friday evening in the Middle District of Tennessee, answering, "Yes, I understand," in Spanish when U.S. Magistrate Judge Barbara Holmes asked him if he understood the charges against him. Judge Holmes set a hearing for June 13, where Abrego Garcia will be arraigned on charges, and the judge will take up the government's, the Department of Justice's, motion to hold him in pretrial detention on the grounds that he poses a danger to the community and is a serious risk of flight. He will remain in federal custody in Tennessee pending next week's hearing. Now, friends, let's go right to the indictment, because I want to highlight what I'll call the problem areas from a prosecutor's perspective. Now, first of all, this is a 2-count indictment. 2 crimes are charged. The first, conspiracy to transport aliens, and the second, unlawful transportation of undocumented aliens. And some people may say, well, look, there's an indictment. Isn't that some evidence that Abrego Garcia committed these crimes? The answer is decidedly no. And here's why I say that. At the beginning of every criminal trial, the judge will instruct the jury, ladies and gentlemen, the indictment in this case is not evidence, and you may not view it as evidence that the defendant did anything or committed any crime. An indictment is merely the formal vehicle, the document that's used to bring a case to trial, to bring charges against somebody, but it is not evidence that can be used against the defendant. So no, it's not evidence. What it is it's a guide that the prosecutors offer, laying out what they believe the evidence will prove, what they think they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Second question that you may ask, well, the grand jury indicted Abrego Garcia, so they must have been provided lots of evidence that he committed these crimes. Friends, here's what I'll say about that. A grand jury indictment is only as good as the ethics of the prosecutor who presents the case to the grand jury. Now, in my experience, the overwhelming majority of the prosecutors are honest, ethical. They do what they're supposed to do before the grand jury. For example, they provide not only incriminating evidence, but what we call Brady evidence, evidence that's exculpatory of the defendant, might help show he didn't commit crimes. There's no constitutional requirement that prosecutors present that kind of evidence, but the Department of Justice requires us to do it. So this grand jury indictment is only as good as the honor and the integrity and the ethics of the prosecutor who presented the case to the grand jury. Let me hasten to add that on the very day this grand jury indictment was issued down in the Middle District of Tennessee, the chief of the criminal division for the U.S. Attorney's Office in that jurisdiction, the Middle District of Tennessee, resigned. Now, he didn't say why, but he said after 15 years as a federal prosecutor, he takes his oath very seriously, and the integrity of the prosecutorial practice is what guides him. And he felt compelled to resign on the very day somebody down in Tennessee asked the grand jury to vote out this indictment against Abrego Garcia. Boy, there's an important data point regarding what may have gone on regarding this indictment. Hopefully, we'll be hearing more about that in the near future. Now, friends, I want to start with some of the dates and the time frames that are set out in the indictment. And ultimately, those dates, those time frames, are really more of an indictment of the Trump administration. A bad look, a black eye. Let's talk about why that is the case. As you can see, the case is being brought by prosecutors in the Middle District of Tennessee, Nashville Division, and the case is captioned United States of America versus Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, and the grand jury charges introductory allegations. At all times material to this indictment unless otherwise indicated. 1. From in or around 2016 through in or around 2025, Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia and others known and unknown to the grand jury conspired to bring undocumented aliens to the United States from countries such as Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Ecuador, and elsewhere, ultimately passing through Mexico before crossing into Texas. The co-conspirators knew the undocumented aliens did not possess authorization to enter the United States. Okay, friends, let's take on that time frame because Donald Trump's Department of Justice alleges in this indictment that Abrego Garcia and others were just running wild. This big, bad conspiracy in the United States of America transporting undocumented aliens from 2016 to 2025. So for the 4 years during the first Trump administration, this robust conspiracy was running rampant in the United States, and Donald Trump and his Department of Justice apparently did nothing about it. Sounds like Trump was letting bad folk run wild in the United States for the entirety of his first term. Let's take on another important date. You may recall that there were some court proceedings involving Abrego Garcia when? In 2019. Who was president? Trump. This was the Trump administration, Trump's Department of Justice, when that court hearing was held in 2019. And at that court hearing, the Trump administration, the Department of Justice, could have presented all this evidence. Judge, Abrego Garcia has been in this big conspiracy for years, 2016 to 2019, running wild, committing crimes, moving undocumented aliens around in the United States. But they didn't say any of that. No. There was a hearing, and you may recall that hearing resulted in a judge ordering that the Trump administration may not deport Abrego Garcia specifically to El Salvador, which, of course, is exactly where the Trump administration ended up sending Abrego Garcia in violation of that court order. But apparently the Trump administration didn't breathe a word of any of this in that 2019 court hearing. Whose fault is that? Assuming this indictment contains truthful and accurate information about Abrego Garcia being in this big old conspiracy from 2016 to 2019. Whose fault is it that none of that was brought to the attention of the judge in 2019? That would be the Trump administration. But wait, there's more. After Abrego Garcia, according to this indictment, had been in this big, bad, dangerous conspiracy for almost a decade, 2016 to 2025, what did the Trump administration do in 2025, in March? Did they indict him for this parade of horribles that they allege he's been involved in for almost 10 years now? No. They stuffed him on a plane and sent him to El Salvador. If he had been committing all these horrible crimes, why didn't you indict him rather than kidnap him, violate his constitutional due process rights of notice and opportunity to be heard, and send him to a prison in El Salvador where the taxpayers were paying to confine him? But friends, be that as it may, the Trump administration went on to unconstitutionally deport Abrego Garcia to El Salvador. And not long after, judges and courts started ordering the Trump administration to facilitate his release and his return to the United States. Trial court judge in Maryland, federal court judge Sines, entered that order. The appeals court affirmed that order. The United States Supreme Court affirmed that order, directing the Trump administration to facilitate his release and return. And what did the DOJ lawyers go into court and say? And what did Pam Bondi tell us all on TV? Can't be done. They actually used the word impossible at one point in time. Abrego Garcia is now in the custody and control of a foreign country, a sovereign nation. We can't bring him back. Can't be done. Well, turns out that was a lie, because they just facilitated the release and return of Abrego Garcia, and he is now in the United States. Of course, to save face, they decided to indict him. And now what I want to do is take a look at the evidence they allege they have supporting this 11th hour indictment after they told us it was impossible to bring him back from El Salvador. And friends, when you go through this indictment, you are going to see lots and lots of summary assertions without facts, without evidence, without dates, without details, no names, no phone numbers, no amounts paid by anybody or received by anybody, just a lot of summary conclusions that Abrego Garcia did all kinds of bad stuff. He did it here, he did it there, he did it everywhere. And the only place you actually see any facts, any evidence, is in paragraph 30. And paragraph 30 is titled Transportation in Tennessee. And some of the allegations include that on or about November 30, 2022, a state trooper with the Tennessee Highway Patrol conducted a traffic stop on a Chevy Suburban, and we are told that Abrego Garcia was the driver of the Suburban. We're told there were 9 additional passengers in the Suburban, all of whom were Hispanic males, and none of whom had identification. We are told that Abrego Garcia falsely told the state trooper that they were coming from St. Louis. Abrego Garcia and multiple passengers said they were heading to Maryland. We are told that they didn't have any luggage with them. We were told that Abrego Garcia had $1,400 in cash in his pocket. Now, friends, let me be clear. The facts laid out in paragraph 30 are suspicious, certainly suspicious to this old prosecutor. So what did the Tennessee state troopers, who had their boots on the ground and were assessing in real time exactly what was going on there, what did they do? They didn't arrest Abrego Garcia. They apparently didn't arrest anybody else who was in that Chevy Suburban, and they didn't so much as write Abrego Garcia a traffic ticket. And yet, when you go through this 10-page indictment, paragraph 30 seems to be the sum total of the specific, detailed, factual allegations anywhere to be found in the indictment. You know, it feels like they built the entire 10-year conspiracy indictment around that one traffic stop in Tennessee that disclosed no overt, clear evidence of criminal conduct. But friends, they must have boatloads of other directly and sharply incriminating evidence of Abrego Garcia, right? Well, if they do, why didn't they include any of it in this 10-page indictment? Because the balance of it is just a bunch of summary assertions and conclusions. Paragraph 30 is the only one that lays out any detailed factual allegations. And another question is, why did the chief of the criminal division in the very U.S. Attorney's Office that had the grand jury issue this indictment, the chief of the criminal division who is in charge of all federal prosecutions in the Middle District of Tennessee, why did he resign on the very day this indictment was returned? You know, friends, if I were part of Abrego Garcia's legal team, I would seriously consider asserting my client's right to a speedy trial. What does that mean? That means within 70 days, the Department of Justice, the federal prosecutors, must take Abrego Garcia to trial on this indictment. And I would be surprised if Pam Bondi's DOJ was up to that task. You know, there's some other reporting that this investigation into this alleged 10-year conspiracy didn't even begin until after the Trump administration had unconstitutionally deported Abrego Garcia to El Salvador, and perhaps even after they'd been ordered to facilitate his return, which they swore up and down was impossible. In how many ways does this stink? Here is ultimately what I hope we see. I'm not expecting Abrego Garcia's lawyers to assert his right to a speedy trial such that the trial must commence in 70 days, because I'm sure his lawyers have a lot of investigating they feel the need to do before they're ready to go to trial. But I want to see a scorched earth, robust motions hearing in this case, so that DOJ has to lay all of its cards on the table and prove to the judge's satisfaction that this is a legitimate prosecution, not trumped up charges as a way to save face after they unconstitutionally deported a man, refused to facilitate his return, had to come up with some way to save face. I'm not doing this because I was ordered to. I'm doing it because I want to do it, because I have now charged Abrego Garcia with crimes. Yeah, I want to see some scorched earth motions hearings in this case so the judge can get to the bottom of it. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.